Today's podcast episode is brought to you by Resurge. Resurge is a performance hygiene brand built for combat athletes. Founded by BJJ practitioner Brad McDonald, Resurge focuses on protecting the skin barrier, preventing mat-borne skin issues, and keeping athletes healthy, confident, and on the mats. The brand is grounded in real-world training experience and science-backed skincare with a simple philosophy: play rough, stay clean. Thank you, and more thank yous. Frank and I are so excited to have an opportunity to share with our listeners today a wrap up of season 2 of the CareerJitsu podcast. I can't thank our listeners enough, Frank. This has been so enlightening. Myself and you, have also been inspired. So we're going to break down some common themes. We've had a lot of feedback from a lot of our listeners about how much they have enjoyed all of the valuable insights and valuable content that we're delivering. And we wouldn't be able to do it without our listeners. So we are very grateful for them.
Amen and hallelujah. This is one of my favorite parts of our podcast because if you think back, Jason, we just started this on kind of like a whim. We're like, oh my gosh, Jiu-Jitsu helps you be so much more effective in your career. And your career, some of the things you learn in your career help you so much on the mats. It was just a natural thing. We just wanted to talk about it and share it. And it kind of snowballs. And it is neat. Like I'm having so many people come up to me and saying, oh, I'm listening to this and my brother's now listening to this. And I have my students come up to me and they're telling me they're listening to this and which episode they like. And old friends are recontacting me on Facebook and I just want to tell you, keep going. So it's really nice to hear that. That's the motivation. That's the fuel that we need to keep the chatting going and to keep the connecting going and making friends all around the world. It's really, really fun and exciting. And Jason, this is going to be like a flow roll with me and you, just culling out for our listeners some of the universal themes that almost every person, every guest on our show seems to share from a different perspective, and then some of the things that we've learned and made us better at our own professions, right?
Yeah, the vision is coming to fruition because we've had we've met with we've had guests from Ireland, from Australia, from all different parts of the country. Where we've had people from the West Coast, the East Coast of the United States, that have come from completely different cultures than we do. So we've been able to have some diversity for our listeners too, so they can hear the perspective of what different people from different cultures get through jujitsu.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it really is kind of like a universal language at this point, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. So
So let me just, before we start, let me just tell our listeners they really better buckle up, put on their helmets, because they're going to get a lot of distilled down wisdom from us right now.
absolutely. Yeah, Frank, can we start? I think, since we started our season 2, one of the things that really sticks out in my mind that I want to start with is the concept of longevity and resilience and adversity, because we had a lot of guests that told us stories this season, and those stories were very inspirational stories. There were stories about people who came from different backgrounds that had to deal with adverse circumstances in their life, and jujitsu helped guide them. Jujitsu became like their lifeline and kept them going. I do remember, just off topic, a few people, like there was a Rolando Torres from New York. He's the
Yes.
guy who was a field operations person, and he's a BJJ black belt and academy owner. And he basically came from the hood in New York. And he was literally, when he was a kid, he was seeing people being shot. And he got involved in his father was a drug dealer, and he had to go through so much in his environment. And jujitsu came into his life out of the blue and saved him and turned him into somebody who is just killing it in life now.
Right. Right. Just a total, like, he went from somebody who was unfortunately as a young teenager, going into illegal activities, right? Illegal activities, having problems with the law. And now he's a prosperous, upright citizen the transformative power of Jiu-Jitsu is encapsulated in his personal story. 100%. That was one of my favorite. The viewers should definitely go back and look at that because it's just fun to watch this guy and hear his stories and to see how much he's grown and developed. And Jason, you said a lot in that like mouthful of longevity and resilience. One, building on that, one of the things I've noticed, almost all of our, if not all, almost all of our guests have talked about the internal battle between I gotta get good fast. I want to move fast. I want to be competitive. I want to push it to the limits. That we all have that angel on our or that devil on our shoulder. And then there's the idea of longevity, resilience, slow growth, natural growth, because we all, as practitioners, struggle with that battle, not only on the mats when you're rolling, but also in our careers, wanting to move too fast and sometimes forgetting about the fundamentals and burning out. And I think everybody in jiu-jitsu says, listen, it's about longevity. It's about taking care of yourself. Stop feeling like you have to go hard on everything and win everything. You need to take time. It's okay to fall down, learn your lessons, take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of your body. Just go and watch once in a while. Just go and just flow roll once in a while. You're in this. Life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And every book you ever read on success, Masters of Success, Atomic Habits, they all say the same thing that jiu-jitsu teaches you. Longevity, resilience, patience, take care of yourself. It's not a sprint.
Right. There were people who had major things happen to them. There's a lot of inspirational episodes that people can go back and listen to that talk about the adversities that they faced and that they were able to continue staying on the mats even in spite of those. It's a journey that is not easy sometimes. You have obstacles. There's a lot of obstacles in your way of your training. And to make BJJ a lifestyle for you, you have to overcome those adversities. And we had some guests that had some major medical issues that had overcome that and became, I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head, the gentleman from Ireland, Mario. This guy, he had vertigo for like 5 years, and then he overcame vertigo, and then right when he overcame vertigo, he came back and started training, and then he had a heart attack. And then after having a heart attack, the guy still didn't stop. He came back and he won a world championship.
That,
Like,
that guy, that guy is the epitome, the quintessential example of slide as far as you want down the mountain. You just start climbing up again. And most of us don't have that level of adversity, right? And that's why that's so inspirational to see somebody who gets slapped down hard, like at the peak of the mountain, gets slapped and goes all the way down to the base of the mountain and says, all right, let me take out my cleats and he starts climbing the mountain. He's halfway up, an avalanche comes, buries him, climbs out of it. It's like, all right, what do I got? That is inspirational. And I think every one of us can, I mean, just personally, and this is so minute, but Jason, that I've had this like ear infection problem and I haven't been able to get on the mats for like 2.5, 3 weeks. And literally what happens to you is at first you really miss it and you want to go back, but then you're like, oh, I don't want to go back. I'm so out of shape. I'm so out of and then you have to remember, and one of the things I teach my kids in my classroom is when everything's going well and you're doing turbo and you're going hard and you're at the top of your game, that's awesome. That's awesome for you. But that doesn't take a lot of willpower. What takes willpower is when you're hurt, you lose a lot, and you come back and you do way less than you used to do, and you still go. That's actually where you grow the most, oddly enough. It's ironic,
right,
right?
right.
It's
And
counterintuitive.
yeah, and we learned from our guests too that you have to focus. You can't focus on things that you can't do. You have to focus on the things that you can do. So we had some guests that came on talking about injuries that they had. There was Tyler Ross from North Carolina that had like bone cancer in his arm. There was Rob Williams from Australia who talked about all of the physics. He was a mountain biker and he got into all kinds of crashes in his mountain bike.
Yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and like these guys like dealt with some major injuries that would have set them back, but they found ways. They found ways to still keep getting on the mats regardless of their injury in some way, in some capacity. You don't have to be able to get on the mats and roll every night. You got to, but you can get on the mats and have the opportunity. It's like you said too earlier, Frank, mental therapy too. It's, being able to get on the mats and be around the camaraderie that you're around, talking to people, even if you're just stretching out on the mats and drilling basic techniques because you can't roll, that's okay too, because that's going to help you physically and mentally just as much.
Absolutely. It's definitely a mindset. Talking about the therapy, I would say almost half of our guests at some point said in their interview that this was their therapy, this is their therapy. I think it was the thoracic surgeon that said something like, you're going to med school, you're doing all this stuff, you're under pressure, and people are like, how do you go to jujitsu too? You're adding extra on your plate. That must be, you know, extra stress for you. And he's like, no, that's where I get my therapy. That's where I get my release. There's nothing else. And I think the thing that most of our guests pointed to about jujitsu is there's a universal wisdom that says you are happiest and you are stress free when you are present in the moment, right? Not projecting about future problems
Right.
and not looking back into the past about things you lament or relationships you've lost. But when you're in the present moment, there's Eckhart Tolle, a German philosopher, that says when you are in the present moment, you are not suffering because the power of now is where you are at home. All suffering, most suffering comes from projecting into your future ghost or projecting into your past ghost. So what a lot of the listeners said, building on Eckhart Tolle's kind of theory, is that when you roll, you are forced to be in the moment. Meditation gets there, but you have to try with meditation. You have to put in the go somewhere quiet. BJJ hands that to you as a gift. Here's a gift. You are now in the moment and you're going to be in the moment for the whole damn roll.
Active
And
meditation, that's
it's
fun.
it's it's basically active meditation, and I think the value of that's probably one of the biggest values that almost everybody who practices gets. That active meditation, you don't need to be all zen. It's just handed to you in a package. You leave and you're like, I had no problems. Well, I had problems with Kimuras and things, but that's a fun problem to have. It's not like thinking about your taxes and your finances, and it helps you transcend the mundane. And I think that's a
Right.
beautiful thing about jujitsu.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're in that present, when you're present in that active meditation, I think that helps you with risk taking. It helps you to be okay with failure, to just do in the moment, just do whatever it is that you have learned to do in that moment. And if it fails, it's okay. You learn from it and you move forward and you keep growing from it. So I really think that a lot of our guests, one of the great things that I thought that the guests gave to our listeners is about that risk taking concept. There were guests that talked about how jujitsu has helped them not be too concerned about taking those risks and just trying to do it regardless. That old Nike saying, "Just do it." um, we had a
Absolutely.
few people like Brad. I think we just had Brad who's the research the skin hygiene.
Yes.
And it's a lot of risk being an entrepreneur, right? I think anybody we had a few entrepreneurs,
We had a
and
lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people
yeah,
who open their own gyms, right?
right. And entrepreneurship definitely is risk taking. You're taking a big risk when you invest a lot of money into something hoping to get a return.
100%. And the thing I like about that and something that I took personally from that, these guys, like our listeners are almost hyperbolic in their experience. They've like you said, having a heart attack and the bicycle crashes and all the stuff that these guys it but in for example in my life I haven't had large events like that, but I still take the message. For example, with the risk taking, one of our I can't remember which guest it was, but one of our guests said, you can have your path that you do well all the time, but if you don't take any risks, you're not going to learn anything. You have to upset the apple cart. You have to drop some apples. You have to
Mhm.
take a risk in order to grow. And I feel like in my teaching sometimes as a teacher, I have my lesson plans. I've done them for 30 years. They're smooth. But when I listen to these guys, I'm like, no, Frank, you got to do that in your class too. You got to like shake things up. And sometimes maybe the kids will learn a little less, but you'll have more fun. Or maybe you'll learn more, but it'll be a little more chaotic. But I could tell you right now, from our podcast, that's one thing that has made me a better teacher. That our
Yeah,
that our
you've
guests
learned,
have given me.
yeah, I mean, on the mats and in your career, right? You throw away things that don't work and you keep the things that do. I know that in my jujitsu career, there's been plenty of times where I've learned techniques and I'm like, I don't think that one's going to work for me. And then I've learned techniques that have changed my entire game and, learned something that I went, wow, that just literally was life changing for me to learn that.
Right, right. And also, Jason, like the gentleman who talked about CLA, is it CLA? Did I get it right?
Yes.
CLA. And I liked after that interview and the basic concept, if you didn't see the episode, which is a great episode, was about not always just like teaching a technique, but let people experiment, give them a goal and give them some guardrails. Like, okay, today you're gonna somebody just get past the legs. That's all you're gonna do, and then reset. Just get past the legs any way you like. Up, down, over, around, but that's it. And
Hmm.
what I really admired about you, Jason, is that you took that, and then I remember the class after that, you let us work that. You used
Hmm.
what the guy talked about, and I'm so sorry. We'll have to put the name and link in our description because I just
Yeah,
can't.
it's Gino Pereira.
Gino, thank you. You're so good with names. So Gino's ideas were great. You heard it. You took a risk. You tried it in the class. I think people benefited from it. We liked it, and now you're applying a little bit more of some of those things. So both of us have taken some of these great ideas from our intelligent guests and been able to apply it in what we do beyond ourselves into how we teach other people.
Right. Yeah, it's helped me as a coach and it's helped my students on the mats too, just being able to be creative, implementing some of that. It's a different training method. So it's not like, you abandon one training method and just go completely with another one. But if you can incorporate different types of training methods into your training, it's only going to help you and your coaches and your students. So the creativity behind that is great. I love the concept with CLA that you're trying to you put people in a situation where they have constraints and you say this is your goal, figure out a way. And rather than teaching a technique, figuring it out on their own through creativity and expression.
Right. And I'm going to collect those words you said, if you figure out a way. So the next thing I wanted to make sure that we did not forget on this podcast, how many of our guests have talked about problem solving, how BJJ teaches you to solve problems in a way that's almost like chess. Let's think of what the final goal is. Let's try to think of being a move or two ahead. And let's understand when we're surprised by something or something happens, how we have to adapt. I don't know how many of our guests must have said the word problem solving, right?
Yeah, yeah. I remember, like you mentioned the word chess. We had Carlos Figueroa. He was a pharmacy tech supervisor, and he talked about jujitsu or his job being like a chessboard. And comparing jujitsu to a chessboard, which was interesting because that's from a managerial perspective. Because I heard about jujitsu being like chess as an individual. When you're on the mat, you have to kind of figure out what moves you need to use against an opponent. But I never heard of it in that way where he talked about it as being managing an entire chessboard
Right.
where he had a staff of pharmacy technicians, and he had to manage all of the pharmacy technicians and all of the systems that they have to use
Yes, I
so that
remember that.
everything needs to be operating well
All the
because these are right.
moving parts, right? And how to move the sprockets so that the machine ran smoothly. That's a great example of that.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, one that I also want to make sure it's so funny because it's the one we don't talk about as much, but sometimes we forget to talk about BJJ's actual intended application. And I remember we talked to Mike Nichols about his story in the hospital when there
Mhm.
was, I think this is when he used to work in the emergency room,
Yep.
and people would come in with, high on drugs and aggressive and assertive, and they're not called bouncers, but they have the the big security guys. And when Nichols was telling us that story about he's watching this guy, I think he was a pretty big guy, and he's going crazy, and the two security guards who were strong guys. I mean, they were managing him, but they couldn't really get him. They couldn't really get him down. The guy was scrappy. So Mike started helping them, and he's like, "Guys, just both of you, just take a step back. I got this." And he just did like a simple technique, got the guy down safely. And the security guys were like, "Holy crap!
Mhm.
You're like half our size, and you did that." So that was like an example of actual physical
Physical
BJJ helping
application.
somebody in their job. And I also remember Anthony had a story about, there was somebody who was maybe scaring some of the people in his church, and he had the confidence to go up and just do a little arm drag and gently show the guy out. I thought
Yeah.
those were two good stories, and I love stories like that.
Yeah, it's nice to hear some of the direct benefits of jujitsu in people's career because sometimes, like the mental side of things, you can't see those things, but the physical attributes that you get from jujitsu, the physiological understanding of the body and the body mechanics and how to apply technique just can translate into somebody's career so easily and so seamlessly. We did have some people that I can think of. Julio Rodriguez, who was from New Jersey. He was a bodyguard. Well, he works for a school system. He's a security supervisor for a school district, so he uses it a lot in the schools. But he also was a bodyguard, and he talked about, and he's a BJJ black belt, so he talked
Right.
about
And
how
he
he
used to
uses
bounce too. And he
yeah,
used to
so
do
it's just
bouncing.
so
Yeah.
seamless that he has these this superpower, and he's able to translate that superpower into his career, which is, a great
Absolutely.
thing.
Superpower, bringing me to the next point, that if there's listeners out there who haven't tried BJJ, almost, I would say 90% of our guests, maybe more, have said it's almost like an echo chamber. Yeah, like whether they're like these really strong physical specimens or they're just normal people, they've all said the same thing. Holy crap. The first time I went to jujitsu, boy, was I humbled. Jiu-Jitsu is a humbling art. And the reason I bring that up is I don't know if you even know this about me, Jason, but I actually took a few years of karate when I was in college, Washin Ryu karate. I did kata and all that stuff.
I knew that,
So
Frank. I knew that.
you didn't know? Okay. All right. So, if you ever want to stand up and strike, I'm game.
Sounds good.
But one of the things we had a really good like philosophical teacher who said, "Wisdom pours into a cup, but the second you're not humble, the cup closes and you don't learn anymore." So he would always tell us that if you want to learn anything, the first thing is you have to take your ego off the top of the cup. You have to make sure you are humble. And when you're humble, you feel that you can learn and you grow that way. So I think it's so important that would you agree, like at least 90% of our listeners, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
of our guests have said, what a humbling experience.
Yeah, I think jujitsu like humbles you in general. So I think that's why it's a common theme. I mean, it's pretty hard not to be humbled on the mats, regardless
It
of who
really
you
is.
are. Even if you're a world champion, you're going to get humbled at some point. And
Yes.
that humbleness, is the reason why people start to once they start to do jujitsu, they start to realize how you have to be patient in your progress. You have to kind of trust in the process of your learning.
Mm.
You have to, you're only gonna, you can't get better quickly. It's gonna be 1% better all the time. And I think that humbleness actually allows you to be able to do that. So,
Yes, 100%. And also, for our listeners who have not tried jujitsu, the reason when you go into a gym, most gyms, that you're going to find people who are happy to see you and want you to like it and going to work with you so you have a good experience is precisely the reason that they are humble.
mhm.
Whereas I think I shared the story on one of our podcasts that I did salsa dancing for a while, and it's not, and some people who do salsa are probably gonna call in and say that's not true, you just had one bad experience. But I'm gonna tell you, if you go to like the socials for salsa dancing and you suck, people don't want to dance with you. They want to go there and they want to do their thing. They're not there to teach you. They're not there. It's like, hey, listen, you got to pay your dues, but it's not, there's no humility. People who are great know they're great and they only want to dance with people who are great. Obviously, not all. It's the exact opposite. That made me appreciate jujitsu so much because I still remember one of my early times, and I was working with Dan, who was a brown belt, I think, or purple or brown at that time. And it was my second class. I'm like, I'm so sorry you got to work with me. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. He's like, no. He's like, this is good. No, you're doing great. It was such, because people are humble, they are happy that you're there and they're going to help you. So if anybody is thinking about doing jujitsu and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go in there. I'm not in shape. I'm not a physical specimen. I'm going to get my ass kicked. No, no, you're going to be welcomed by people who are humble, who are glad you're there, and who want you to come back. And you're going to
Yeah.
see the magic, right?
Yeah. And that willingness to help each other on the mats, that brings me to a really important word that we learned through our guests is empathy.
Mm.
We had a few guests that talked about how jujitsu really made them a more empathetic person in their professional lives and in their personal lives. We had the teacher, the high school teacher, John,
Yes.
John Luna. He talked about how like not every kid is the same and you have to be able to treat them differently and based on what their socioeconomic status is. And not everybody has the same opportunities and you have to be empathetic to that. And then we also had Grace, who was Grace Nowak, a female BJJ black belt. She was the MMA fight. She fought MMA, came to our gym a few times, and she was a child advocacy person. And she talked a lot about how she has to be empathetic in her job to different family dynamics. So it helped her in her job being more empathetic too.
So it really is like a chain. You go from humility to empathy, and then in practice, that means meeting people where they're at, right?
Yeah. Good connection there,
Yes.
Frank.
Yeah, it's a beautiful chain. And it's like so funny how deep the philosophy of jujitsu is. It's not just a bunch of people rolling around on a mat going savage. There's so much depth to it. That's why we do this podcast, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Because there, one of the things that I thought a lot of people talked about, and this is going to sound, it's almost cliche. I almost don't want to bring it up, but I feel like so many people did bring it up. The ability to breathe, like control. I remember when I started, and everybody's like, if you want to be good, you have to learn how to breathe. I'm like, that is the most ridiculous. That, no, I need more muscle. I need more flexibility. I need to gain some weight to be a bigger person, and I need to be more savage. And everybody's like, no, you got to breathe. And good God, at some point, everybody learns in jujitsu. You have to breathe, especially when you're under pressure, so that you can stay calm and comfortable. So we have people who are doing like electrical lines under pressure, where the live wires. We've talked to people who are doing surgeries. We've talked to engineers doing giant projects for buildings. People who feel pressure from all sides. And what did they all say? Every one of them. First thing I do. And that is part of the whole superpower, super. power thing, is it not?
Yeah, that's yeah, I think that that also allows you to be able to be focused too, like if you're breathing, that's essential to life, You
It
have to
is,
if you can
yeah, right.
there's a saying, I can't remember I think it might have been Bruce Lee that said man can't breathe, man can't fight. It might have been Bruce
I
Lee, I can't remember.
I like
But
it.
that is that's so true. You can't do anything without that. Like, for example, we had some people that talked about precision, and how they're so focused in on one thing that they have to continuously breathe and focus at the same time. And we had Juan, we know Juan Martinez. He's a tattoo artist, and he talked about how he has to be very detail oriented, and he has to be able to really focus in on his artwork and and because sometimes he is sitting there for hours at a time trying to draw or color in something, and he has to continuously focus and breathe for he was saying sometimes 8 hours at a time he needs to be able to
Right.
do that. That takes a lot of focus. And
Yes.
even the surgeon, the cardiothoracic surgeon, Jose Torres, imagine doing heart surgery and needing to be able to focus in on what you're doing and stay calm and keep breathing and keep focusing on what you're doing.
Where the stakes are irreversible, right? The sta you can't mess up on somebody's tattoo because that's on their arm for life. And obviously, if you're doing surgery on somebody, that could be life or death.
Right.
So we've seen it
Yeah.
applied absolutely to its
And that
extremes.
Yeah, and that translates onto the mats, right? If you're in a roll, say for example, you're in a roll and halfway through the roll, you lose your focus and you hold your breath and you panic and you stop thinking about what your next move needs to be or your next grips that you need. Next thing you know, you're being choked or smashed.
100%. We've all been there, and
So
we've
that's a
all
direct
seen.
translation,
Right, right, and we've all seen the opposite when you just get your frames, let yourself breathe, and a lot of times there's a way out, right? And I think that was a theme too. There's always a way out. There's always a way out. And you say that. I remember I loved a quote that you said. I don't always feel it, but I try to, and it's a great quote. You said, "Really, there's no bad position. There's no bad position. You're able, if you're in a position, there is a technique and a strategy that you can employ to get out of that position. So when you're rolling, don't think, crap, I'm in a bad position. Think, I'm in this position. So what are some of the responses I could do from this? Are there some good things that I could do right now? And there is always something good you can do. There's always something you can do. So I love that. And I just think that's a great, honestly, that was one of my favorite quotes that you've ever given me. There's no such thing as a bad position. You're in that position. You're in that and by the way, that's great when somebody gets a tax bill that's like, "Holy crap, we owe this in taxes." All right. Okay, that's a situation. How are you going to handle that now? Right?
right?
Or a
Right.
company's laying off people. Okay, that's the situation. Let's breathe and let's talk about how we're going to handle that, how we're going to
Yeah.
approach that.
The more time that you dwell on something, the worse it's going to get. You can't you can reflect on something, but there's a difference between reflecting on something and dwelling on it, you know?
Yes.
So if you take it, you reflect upon it and you make the changes, everything's good. You dwell on it, you take time dwelling on it, it's only going to get worse.
I'm actually going to use that as one of my motivations for my students. I like that. Reflecting versus dwelling. That's just a great little quote right there. I mean, we're going on like almost 38 minutes. I want to make sure that I mentioned this because this is how philosophical BJJ is. I'm reading a book called 1776 by McCullough, which is about 1776, our American Revolution. And it's so funny. I take notes. I'm really nerdy. I take like notes on on my computer so that I have like a book report for myself. And you have no idea how many times I've written in my notes, "Oh my gosh, this is BJ oh my gosh, this is BJJ." And one of the things is what a lot of our guests have faced is a hell of a lot of failure. Almost all of our guests have talked about major failures that they've overcome. That's why they want to be on our show. That's why we invite them on our show. They face some really deep failures. And I'm reading the 1776, and I always thought that like Washington kicked ass all the time. He had like a good moment in Boston, and then he literally lost five big battles in a row in New York. Five of them got decimated, had to retreat. He was losing faith of everybody. He said, "Holy cow, I just got my ass kicked in five different huge battles. My men and my best friends are losing faith in me." He said, "But when I go out there and I face my people, my face is going to look like I believe. My posture is going to show that I believe. And I'm going to tell myself that failure is just part of the recipe. I'm going to learn from this and we are going to beat the British." And all the time I'm reading this stuff and how he reacted. It's like the guy took BJJ. It's all the stuff that we learn on the mats. And
Maybe
I
he
think
did. We just
that's
don't know it.
hey, was it around the Japanese version was around back then, right? But the Brazilian wasn't.
Yeah, but Japan was isolated country at that time, so we wouldn't
Yeah.
have gotten
Yeah.
anything.
But maybe he channeled it. But I
Yeah,
just
but
goes
no, I
back to
agree,
the,
Frank.
I digress a bit, but I just wanted to make that point that I think almost every single one of our interviewees, our guests, had a story about a failure or multiple ones. And they failed a lot more than they succeeded, but their successes then eclipsed their failures.
Yeah. And the bonds that you create through failures too, we had, for example, I think we had Alec Lindstrom talk about, Alec Lindstrom, for those of you who don't know, definitely check out his podcast.
Yeah, that podcast
Amazing.
has a lot of plays
He,
on that. That
my gosh, his mindset, he's a professional football player, played in the NFL. And his mindset, he talks about, go back and listen to it because he talks about how you grow through failures with people. So like if you're in and around people that you have hard times with, those are the ones that you actually develop strong bonds with. If you're around people and you're partying all the time, having great times, having all successes, those aren't the people that you have the strongest bonds with. You have the strongest bonds with people who you go through tough times with. Um,
hard times
and
solidify
yeah, so
relationships.
that's an example of that with Washington, right, Frank?
A
That
hundred
brings
percent.
and yeah, and that brings me to the one more I don't want this one to get away either, is talking about trust and relationships. The very first podcast of our season 2 was with Jose and Anna, and they talk about relationships. That was a great podcast for anybody who wants to listen to a podcast about a father and a daughter. Okay. It's a father and a daughter that did jujitsu together, still do jujitsu together for the past 18 years. And the accountability that they had with each other and the trust that they developed was very empowering, and it kept them on the mats, and it still keeps them on the mats today. And so they went through a lot of hard times together on the mats, and that translated into their personal life and in their family relationship too.
Absolutely, and that's one of the most beautiful things. And I just it's a I it's it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's a beautiful thing. If you and your children do jujitsu, you're gonna have such an extra bond. It's an extra spoke in the wheel that really brings you together. And we've seen that. We've seen that on the mats. So just
Yeah,
shouting that out there for anybody who wants to create that kind of bond with their child. It's a great way to do it. Great way to do it.
absolutely.
Just how powerful experience with a sport. Listen, the sport has its own intrinsic value. It makes you more flexible. It gives you better cardio. It puts your body in good shape. It gives you confidence. You could use it if you need to defend yourself. All that is great. That's the intrinsic value of it. But the truest value, I think, is expressed in the things we just talked about. How it actually helps you in your life and in your career. And if you and I did our job today, we were able to effectively convey the wisdom of our amazing guests in a nutshell for our listeners just to feast on, to enjoy, and to learn from. And I hope we did
Yeah.
that today.
I hope we did too. And anybody who is listening to this today, if it's your first time listening to it, and you haven't listened to any of our other episodes, please go back and go through some episodes and listen to them. Listen to all of them, really, but you can pick and choose if you want to start with if you're a first time listener, because we have 35 podcasts. We have 35 episodes out at the time that we're having this interview right now. We're in 42 different countries, and we have about 1,800 downloads in the past 7 months. We have even started taking on sponsors. So
Yeah, it's
we are
just
we
taking
are
on a life of
growing,
its own.
and yeah, and we're growing because of these inspirational stories that we get for our guests, because without them, without our guests, we wouldn't be able to deliver this valuable content to our listeners.
Right. And if you want to give back, the best way to give back is to share this. Put it on your Facebook or your Insta, even your Finsta if you have one. Let your friends know, send it to somebody who you think would enjoy it. That is the best way you can help us. Another way is to drop a comment or a heart. Let us know you're out there, you're listening, and just know we appreciate you. You guys have been the fuel to this fire, and we appreciate you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Frank. Thanks for your time today. And
Jason,
listeners,
thank
thank you for
you.
listening in. Have a
Great
great day,
stuff.
everyone.
Great stuff. Peace out.
Bye bye.